Hey guys, I'm gonna go over how you do your decades outline using the sample that we went over in class from the outline sample and components explanation. So at the top you see where it says paper title. You're just gonna leave that blank for right now, and you're going to also leave A and B for your introduction blank as well. Then right here, you're going to type your final thesis statement that you are going to use after you get it approved by your teacher. Okay, so then your first topic is going to be that first big topic that you chose. In this case, we're going to use international relations and the military. Okay, and then I'm going to look at my big idea and subtopic number 1. And in this case, the big idea is going to be the war on terrorism. Okay, then my first supporting point. So I have to ask myself, what are some of the points that I want to touch upon relating to the war on terrorism? And the first point that I'm going to make is I am going to talk about the different attacks relating to this war on terrorism. Okay, so then the first thing that I'm going to talk about regarding the attack is going to be what attack. So I'm going to talk about 9/11 first. Okay, so then here where it gets to my evidence, okay, here where it gets to my evidence, this is where I'm going to use information from my note sheets to support this idea right here. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to look through my notes and I'm going to find the quote that's on the page, and then after I'm finished writing in the quote, I'm going to make sure that I follow the directions for my in-text citation. So I'm going to look at the in-text citation paper, figure out if there is an author, isn't there an author. If there is an author, I'm going to do author's last name and page number. If there isn't, then I'm going to put the title of the article that I read if it is online. Okay, so in this case, it is from, the article is from 9/11 attacks. Okay, and I'm going to put that in quotation marks, parentheses, and then the period is always going to go on the outside. Okay, so then after I'm done talking about 9/11, the second thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be the Boston Marathon. Okay, keep in mind that these do not necessarily need to be sentences. Okay, you're just kind of getting your ideas down on paper. Okay, so then I'm going to figure out what evidence, again, from my notes, am I going to write here about the Boston Marathon. Okay, then the third thing I'm going to talk about is going to be the Fort Hood shooting. And again, what is going to be the information that I find from my notes that's going to go right here to support it. Okay, so now if I were to go further, my second point that I'm going to talk about regarding this whole war on terrorism is going to be the different groups. Okay, so I've already talked about the attacks. Now I'm going to talk about the different groups. Okay, so my first example that I'm going to use is going to be Al-Qaeda. Okay, so then again, what information from my research am I going to use to support this idea of Al-Qaeda? And that's going to go right here. Okay, so this is going to be a quote from my notes about Al-Qaeda, and I'm going to make sure that I use an in-text citation. Okay, and then the second example that I'm going to use is now I'm going to talk about ISIS. Whoops. Okay, and then I am going to again find a quote of information. Then here I'm going to talk about the Taliban. Okay, now if any time you have an issue where your numbers are going, your letters or your numbers are disappearing, if I were here and that turns into a 2, all I need to do is click the Shift Tab button to move it back one step, okay? So this is going to be all of the information about my groups. Then the third point I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about here the effects of terrorism, okay? And again, my first example is I'm going to talk about how the war on terrorism affected the economy. And I'm going to have my quote from the text to support it. Then I'm going to talk about how it affected the materials. There's that boo-boo again, so I hit Shift Tab. Then I'm going to talk about how it affected our materials. Okay, and then the third thing I'm going to talk about is how it affected our trade with other countries. Okay, so if you lose that number, you can go ahead and hit backspace, return, and then that Shift Tab again. Okay, so this is everything for my first big idea. So what you need to understand is that right here, you have this very large idea, okay? And then as we go further, everything gets smaller and smaller and much more detailed, okay? So as we go further and further down, everything is going to get much more specific, okay? So everything in pink are my supporting points, okay? Everything in green are going to be my examples. Okay, and everything in, let's do red. Oops. Everything in red is going to be my in-text citation and my information directly from my notes. Okay, so ultimately, this is what your paper, we're going to take this and apply it directly to your paper. Okay?